Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister through you. There's so much to say here, so much to clarify. The arguments here are extremely nuanced. The implications of this bill are profound. There are voices that must still be empowered through this process. And this is for all of Canada. Canadians deserve a fulsome debate. MPs deserve the opportunity to contribute to that fulsome debate. And would the minister not agree that even good progressive legislation has to go through the parliamentary process? We need to have these conversations out in the open. And there are many voices on either side of this bill that should have their day in the House of Commons. Would the minister not agree? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the honourable member for her question. Again, a very important question, and I would agree with her in principle that we need to hear voices and we need to move legislation through. But I remind her that this is a process. It is a process which began 25 years ago with the passage of UNDRIP at the United Nations. It's a process which was picked up in Canada by Romeo Saganash in the previous Parliament. It's a process in which we will continue to be in dialogue with other parliamentarians, where we will continue to be in dialogue in a distinctions-based fashion with the myriad forms of Indigenous leadership across Canada. And this is just a way station in the process. It will continue through the development of an action plan for the implementation of UNDRIP afterwards. And perhaps I would suggest the honourable member that that's really where the heavy lifting is going to be done with respect to our relationship with the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. So I agree with her, but we do have to be careful to not let perfection be the enemy of the good. And we need to move this legislation forward in order to get to the next step. And
I thank so much my honourable colleague for her incredible, impactful words today, and you just articulated so many of the things that need to be said more often in this House. And I've struggled, so much with this bill because I have high hopes, but I also have those same concerns and that same mistrust. I'm thinking of court cases, against child welfare, residential school survivors, the boil water advisories, the lack of action on missing and murdered Indigenous women, the snail's pace of implementing the TRC recommendations, the poverty, the state of housing. And I wonder, will this bill, truly address this situation? For communities on the ground, day-to-day band operations, what will this mean in practice? And I think that's a question I'm having trouble articulating. And just really, is it symbolism over substance, or can I believe in Canada this time around?
Well, I think it's important to
the honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
I was just so engaged. I just, took my own turn, Madam Speaker. I apologize. I was engrossed. But, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for the question. And I think what it does is it provides us with another legal tool that we can use to protect Indigenous rights in this country, which include treaties, international law, domestic law, Indigenous law. It provides us with another legal tool that we can use to affirm our rights. It does not take away from our rights. It does not impact our rights. What it does, it affirms the application of the minimum human rights standards articulated in UNDRIP as having application into Canadian law, and it's beyond time that this happens. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank the member for his comments today. Resource development and extraction have offered some opportunities for First Nation communities: training, jobs, accommodation agreements, perhaps economic prosperity in certain cases. The trouble with highlighting only the positive is that it lacks integrity. It comes off as disingenuous when we know that many of the ways that resource development and extraction have actually used and abused Indigenous territories and peoples. Can this member comment on some of the ways that missing and murdered Indigenous women are impacted by, say, man camps that accompany this development?
The honourable member, Parliamentary Secretary, has less than 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you, and thank you for the important question. Obviously, there's more work to be done. We need, as a House of Commons here, we need, as all political parties, we need to support our Indigenous communities all across the country. We need to make sure that we look at housing, clean water. We look at many issues that are facing our First Nations. We have many issues to deal with, and we are going to be taking action. We are making great strides, and we need to promote the good that's happening in our Indigenous communities and need to do better. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for his comments today. We've heard about how quickly we need to pass this piece of legislation, and I understand, that in the idea of perfect in a perfect world is not necessarily, what we can aim for, but there are significant amendments that must be made to this bill, and I'd like to hear what the member can comment on that, specifically around the lack of true intent around including the word racism. So it's not there. We see instead systemic discrimination. We see that there is a measure to address injustices, but why does that hesitancy to address racism exist? Can the member comment on that?
The honourable member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country. A brief answer, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from Fredericton for a great question. And certainly the systemic racism exists in our country, and I mentioned a few of the examples going back, over 100 years of how that's been present, in our country, and you just have to look at the lack of access of clean drinking water in way too many areas across our country, and the third world conditions that many First Nations live under at this point. So. I certainly agree that this is here and that we need to make sure that we're addressing that through any means possible.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for his comments today. I just want to ask quickly about some of the words that we use. Language is so important, and reconciliation has been said time and time again in this House. I've heard from many people that feel that this word is actually losing some of its meaning. And in fact, if we think of reconciliation as to reconcile, to improve what was perhaps once a good relationship, which we know that was not the case. Can the member speak about perhaps reparations and what we could actually be doing in Canada to ensure that we repair a broken relationship?
The honourable member for Desnette, Mississippi, Churchill River. A brief answer, please.
I will try, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that question. I'm going to simply just point out to the member opposite that the slogan of my campaign and in my riding has been building authentic relationships with people. I serve a riding that's 70% Indigenous people, and I believe that authenticity, about that being real, about having good conversation and listening to the concerns of the people, that's the answer to repair the relationship. We have to get out there. We have to be part of their lives. We have to listen to their concerns. We have to take them consider them valid, but it's about building relationships that are real and authentic.